Module 54 covers adulthood and the physical, cognitive, and social development that takes place in adulthood. Adulthood is classified from the 20s to the 30s, and physical abilities begin to decline in mid-20s, specifically muscular strength, reaction time, sensory keenness, and cardiac output. Cognitive development in early adulthood is the peak time for so many types of learning and remembering. So during the mid-20s, there's a lot of memories being created, such as like your first kiss, first time moving out, first time getting a job. Um, so that's on average.
Okay. Middle adulthood. Middle adulthood is from the 30s to 65, and this is when there's a decrease in fertility and physical abilities. Women go through menopause during this time, and it's a natural cessation of menstruation, and it also refers to the biological changes a woman experiences as their ability to reproduce declines. Sexual activity lessens during this time, but most men and women remain capable of satisfying their sexual needs and express satisfaction with their sex life.
The characteristics of later life is aging. And exercise actually slows down aging because it enhances muscles, bones, and energies and helps to prevent obesity and heart diseases. It also stimulates brain cell development and neural connections due to oxygen increase and nutrition flow. So muscular strength, reaction time, and stamina diminish in late adulthood. Visual Visual sharpness diminishes also, specifically distance perception and adaptation to light level changes. The eye's pupils shrink and its lens become less transparent, reducing the amount of light reaching the retina. When you're 65 years old, the retina receives only about one-third as much light as a 20 years counterpart. So senses and smells and hearing also diminish, so everything in your body just starts to deteriorate. Your body's disease-fighting immune system weakens, making older adults more susceptible to life-threatening elements. Okay. On the other side, because they have been living for so long, they've been exposed to many antigens, so there's more antibodies in their body. So they suffer fewer short-time elements, such as the common flu and cold viruses. Another characteristic of later adulthood is the slower neural processing combined with diminished sensory abilities, and it can increase accident rates. Brain regions important to memory begin to atrophy during aging, so people don't remember as well. Atrophy of the inhibition controlling frontal lobes explains older people's occasional blunt questions and comments. So if you go to a Thanksgiving party and your grandparents start saying, "Have you put on some weight?" or they just started saying something that's not as socially acceptable, then that's probably due to the atrophy of the inhibition controlling of the frontal lobes. And how well older people remember depends on the task. If the information is meaningless, nonsense, syllables, or unimportant events, the older we are, the more errors we're likely to make. But if it's meaningful, older people with rich webs of existing knowledge will help them to hold it. So you remember stuff if you can associate it to another object. But it might take longer than younger adults to produce the words and the things they know. Terminal decline refers to the idea that age is less a predictor of memory and intelligence than proximity to death. So when you're closer to death, your memory and intelligence start to deteriorate, and it's a sign for death, not age.
There are two types of studies in this module, and the first is a cross-sectional study, which is a study in which people of different ages are compared with one another. So comparing people in their 20s to people in their 60s at the same time. There's also a longitudinal study, and this research is when people are studied and restudied over time, so studying someone from their 20s up to their 60s. Okay. So midlife transition is a crisis, a time of great struggle, regret, or even feeling struck down by life. So in the early 40s, like an example of this would be a man who forsakes his family for a younger girlfriend and a hot sports car. 1 in 4 adults who report experiencing a life crisis, a trigger is not age, but a major event, such as a life-threatening illness, divorce, or job loss. There's also a sandwich generation, which is where people in their middle life simultaneously support their aging parents and their emerging adult children or grandchildren. The social clock is a term that refers to the culturally preferred timing of social events, such as marriage, parenthood, and retirement. So this would refer to the right time to leave a home, get a job, get married, have children, or retire. This varies from era to era and culture to culture. Chance events can have lasting significance. An ironic but true story of this is when psychologist Albert Bandura was giving a lecture on the psychology of chance encounters in life's past. A book editor who came to the lecture ended up marrying the woman who happened to sit next to him. Social development is the idea that differences are created by significant life events.
During our adulthood, we have a lot of commitments. As Erik Erikson classified, the stages of psychological development are said to be intimacy and generativity. Intimacy is the idea of forming close relationships, and generativity is being productive and supporting future generations. As Sigmund Freud classified, the adult commitments are love and work.
So, love. The bonds of love are satisfying and enduring when there is a similarity of interest and values, a sharing of emotional and material support, and an intimate self-disclosure. Marriage bonds last longer when couples marry after the age of 20 and are between two well-educated people. The increase in divorce rate partly reflects women's lessened economic dependence and men and women's rising expectations of each other. Cohabiting does not really work, and cohabiting is when two people live together but do not get married. People who cohabitate have higher rates of separation. Children born to cohabiting parents are about 5 times more likely to experience their parents' separation than are children born to married parents. Cohabitors tend to be initially less committed to the idea of enduring marriage. They even become less marriage supporting while cohabiting.
So now marriage. Marriage is a predictor of happiness, sexual satisfaction, income, and physical and mental health. Neighborhoods with high marriage rates typically have low rates of social pathologies, such as crime, delinquency, and emotional disorders among children. Observations of 2,000 couples show that the indicator of marital success is at least a 5-to-1 ratio of positive and negative interactions. Couples who make it refrain from putting down their partners. So 5-to-1 is like, okay, you yell at this person for one time, but then you bring the person up 5 times on average. When children begin to absorb time, money, and emotional energy, satisfaction with the marriage itself may decline. A more satisfying marriage breeds better parent-child relations. And also, later on in the years, when your children departs from the family, it's very significant for everyone's life, and it's very difficult. There's a common syndrome called the empty nest syndrome, and the only symptom of empty nest syndrome is increased smiling, because an empty nest is a happy place when your children are leaving your family, going on to their own lives.
The teens to midlife, people experience a strengthening sense of identity, confidence, and self-esteem. In relation to life satisfaction, work is when you're happy about having work that fits your interest and provides you with a sense of competence and accomplishment. Who you are should depend on what you do.
Life satisfaction declines as death approaches. Income shrinks, work is often taken away, the body deteriorates, recall fails, energy wanes, family members and friends die or move away, death looms over closer. However, people over 65 years old are not notably unhappy. They have positive feelings after midlife, supported by enhanced emotional control, and they put the negative feelings aside. Older adults also appear to have fewer problems in their social relationships, and they experience less intense anger, stress, and worry. The aging brain is something that nurtures these positive feelings. For example, the amygdala, a neural processing center for emotions, responds less actively to negative events during the later lives of your adulthood. Interactions less with the amygdala interacts less with the hippocampus, a brain memory processing center. Reactions to negative images also diminish with age, shown by brain waves and brain scans. Biological influences, psychological influences, and social culture influences all contribute to successful aging. Specifically, there's no genetic predispositions, appropriate nutrition that plays into the biological aspect of successful aging, and there's also optimistic outlook, physical and mentally active lifestyle, along with support from family and friends, meaningful activities, cultural respect for aging, and life and safe living conditions.
So the last stage of life is death, which is our inevitable end. Grief is especially severe when a loved one's death comes suddenly and before its expected time on the social clock, especially with, say, like children. And cultures differ in how they grieve, and there are many misconceptions about death. So some being that terminally ill and bereaved people do not go through identical predictable stages such as denial before anger. So yearning for a loved one reached a high point about 4 months after the loss, with anger peaking on average about a month later. Those who express the strongest grief immediately do not purge their grief more quickly. There is a strong healing power in the passing of time, the support of friends, and the act of giving support and help to others. Grieving spouses who talked often with others or receive grief counseling address about as well of those who grieve more privately.
Integrity is a feeling that one's life has been meaningful and worthwhile. Life itself can be affirmed by death. As Erik Erikson said, you should review your lives not with despair but with integrity. Facing death with dignity and openness helps people complete the life cycle with a sense of life's meaningfulness and unity, the sense that their existence has been good and that life and death are part of an ongoing cycle. So it's important for people to accept death. And we have inserted 2 little videos, actually 3. The first one is just telling you how the cycle of death, how people go through stages and cycles of death, and our misconceptions actually explain that it's not always true, but it's really funny. It's a really funny video because the giraffe is hilarious. And the second one is about Alzheimer's and people and old people. It's a very sad video, so if you feel like you just want to cry, you're stressed out, you can just watch it, and then I promise you'll be bawling afterwards. The third one is just like a commercial for a nursing home. It basically goes through life and like in general, and like you can see how your life progresses, and everybody was once young.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, bye.